I just learned about one of the most peculiar jobs that I never would have imagined existed, let alone actually be successful. A baby name consultant.
Some expecting parents aren't coming up with names on their own. They're hiring baby name consultants. Can you believe such a thing exists?
No, I can't believe something like this exists, and honestly, I should have expected it. We're living in a day and age where normal sustainable professions are becoming obsolete. Go to trade school and become something like an electrician? Ugh. Go to college and become a professor at a major university? Cringe. Rate baby names and charge parents money to give them even worse names? Hell yeah! It's just such a weird profession, and I'm using that word very loosely. It's probably a scam, and you bet your sweet bippy I'm going to talk about it.
Some parents turning, unbelievable, to naming consultants on platforms like TikTok to help them find the perfect fit.
The baby naming industry has sort of blown up.
Colleen Slagan owns Naming Baby. She charges between $250 to $400 for her consultations, and business is booming.
$250 to $400 is a pretty penny just to name a child. I spit that shit out for free every time I create a character in a game of D&D. Now obviously this goes without say, but babies are expensive. You're not going to be able to go through 9 months, let alone 18 years raising a child without your wallet crying. However, most of those expenses are necessary and part of their growth and development. Naming them is not. Most people, most normal people at least, can do that for free. That's like one of the few things left in the world that is. Excluding trademarks and copyright laws, you can name your child without ever having to pull out a credit card. There's also no guarantee that a baby will keep their birth name down the line. That being the case, why would you want to waste a couple $100 naming someone who could very easily choose to be acknowledged as someone else? Obviously, that's not the main issue here, but yes, it is worth mentioning that you could pay $400 to name your kid Joe, but they could decide they want to be called Oppenheimer later in life.
You know, it's the first choice you're making as a parent. It's the first sort of piece of identity you're giving to your child.
I have to give this woman props, however, for finding a way to monetize name suggestions. She tries to justify it by saying she spends hours on personalizing and customizing the suggestions. So for $250 you get 10 names, and for $400 you get 30. But from what I can tell, they're just normal names. For $200 to $400, I'd expect these to be the names of future celebrities, something the child can monetize down the line. But nope, it's just the most practical names ever, like Lily or Thomas. Even JoJo's Bizarre Adventures got more creative with their names. They could have done Joshua and Joanna, but instead we got Jotaro and Jolene. Sure, she'll personalize it based on things the couple provides, like my wife was born in the South, or we met in a bar, and then she'll go, okay, well, why don't you name your daughter Georgia and name your son Jack Daniels? Actually, that's still too creative for her. Realistically, she'll probably suggest if it's a boy, name it Austin or Charlie, and if it's a girl, Charlotte or Brandy.
Holly and Eric Stein own a postpartum meal delivery service and are expecting baby number 3 at the end of August.
I don't think I even knew something like this existed.
I don't think anyone knew this existed, because it's really unnecessary. Again, you can do this for free. Just Google names if you're desperate. Don't be giving some random stranger on TikTok your credit card information. That's a recipe for disaster. Not to mention, why would you want to pay hundreds of dollars to have someone else name your child? They're basically giving you a list, and it doesn't really matter what they write down in the end because you probably feel obligated to use at least one of the suggestions considering you paid $250 to $400 for it. The whole thing feels like a scam, yet is being treated like a real profession, like it's a viable career option.
They've been struggling to find a name that will sound good with their 2 kids, Rory and Blair. They hired Colleen and now have a top few to choose from, but are waiting until baby's arrival to make a final decision.
It was obvious that she had put a lot of thought into this.
Sure, at the end of the day, it's their money and they can spend it however they like. But why though? Why would you want to spend hundreds of dollars to have somebody else name your child? Are you really that lazy? Imagine down the road your child finds out the reason why they're named Billy is because you couldn't give a shit to do it yourself. so you just hired somebody else to do the bare minimum. What kind of example are you setting as a parent? At the very least, that's just reckless spending. It's also just concerning how normalized it's become to monetize everything. Even something as simple as naming a child is somehow a business practice. That's actually scary to think about, and a little bit concerning. She provides examples on her website about consultations, the process, and what to expect. Basically, you'll send her a message going over the dilemma along with general notes. For example, here they talk about how they're not loving any of the names they come up with, and how they have a daughter named Lola, and wants something uncommon to name baby number 2. She then takes in all this information and gives her impression on the names they've considered. Basically, it plays out like one of those online questionnaires, like find out which anime character you are, where Colleen is the one determining which name works best for this baby. Not really useful, it's just her giving an opinion on someone's name, which shouldn't matter considering she's not the parent of the child being named. So she gives her suggestions along with a brief explanation behind them. She states the common denominator behind what they were considering was they were uncommon, and keeps that in mind. For example, Jennings. That sounds like the f***ing opposite of what they were going for. If I was close friends with this couple and heard them say they've settled on Jennings, I'd assume they got a butler. But yeah, she explains it feels related to Jameson, but a little more unique and a little less preppy. I have to disagree. That sounds like the preppiest name you could come up with. Her next suggestion was Briggs or Brig, and says it's a surname that reminds her of Banks and is a fresh take on Brooks, which is a name that's becoming quite popular. Now, both of these names suck ass, that's just my opinion, so if the baby hasn't been named yet and the couple finds my video, let me just throw in a couple suggestions for free. Instead of Jennings or Briggs, maybe try Bennett or Jared. Now, I'm not a baby name consultant. I've got my father's creativity when it comes to naming children. If it weren't for my mother, I'd have a brother named Preston and a sister named Ann Courtney. And outside the family name that'll go to my first son, I haven't really given much thought as to what I'll name my future children, but I'll put on my thinking cap and give y'all a couple of suggestions free of charge. If there's any expecting couples out there, feel free to use these. They're royalty free. I just ask that you put that money into a savings account instead of Colleen's pockets so that said child can get an education and pursue something more meaningful than being a baby name consultant. First name, Alara. This was inspired by one of Jupiter's moons of the same name. It means light and was often given to girls who were thought to have special connections to the divine gods and helped guide the people around them to a better light. It's a perfect name for a child of new parents and can help give them guidance through this new life of theirs. Another name I can really appreciate is Diartima, which is something I came up with when I played No Man's Sky. I mean, if you're a big anime fan and watch a lot of One Piece, then this is a creative take on the will of D. If you don't like One Piece for some reason, then I mentioned JoJo's Bizarre Adventures prior. You can name your child Joaquin or Jorgen and have them be a JoJo. Or if you want something simpler, there's always Jordan or Joel. Lastly, this might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's a deep, profound name that I pulled out of my ass just now. Oplet. It's a combination of Oprah and omelet. So yeah, that pretty much summarizes this job. Again, you're better off just doing it the old-fashioned way by sitting down and actually thinking about what you want to name your baby, because this is a lot of money for suggestions that you might not even like. I couldn't find any information on what happens if you don't like any of the names Colleen suggests, but that doesn't really matter. Either way, I think this is a stupid job, a complete waste of money, and I just had to talk about it. That's really about it. So,